The crackling of the campfire filled the air as I settled into my usual spot, surrounded by a group of fresh-faced park rangers eager to learn the secrets of whispering pines. The flickering light cast eerie shadows on their young faces, reminding me of the countless stories I'd shared over the years, each one a cautionary tale about the dangers that lurked within the forest's depths. I cleared my throat, capturing their attention, and began. Tonight, I want to talk about Rule 2 and why it's one of the most important guidelines we have here at the park. It's a story that still haunts me to this day, and one that I hope will stay with you as you embark on your own journeys as rangers. I took a sip of my coffee, the bitter liquid warming my throat as I gathered my thoughts. It was about a decade ago when things started to take a turn for the strange. Rangers and visitors alike were vanishing without a trace, leaving behind nothing but whispers and speculation. At first, we thought it might be the work of a serial killer or some kind of wild animal, but the truth was far more sinister. The rangers leaned in closer, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. I could see the questions burning in their minds, but I held up a hand, urging them to let me continue. Around the same time, we started receiving an unusual number of radio transmissions and phone calls, all claiming to be from lost children in need of assistance. The voices were always the same, young, scared, and desperate for help. It was heartbreaking to hear, and every fiber of our being wanted to rush out there and save them. I shook my head, the memory of those haunting calls still fresh in my mind. But something about it just didn't sit right with me. The timing was too perfect, the stories too similar. It was as if someone, or something, was orchestrating these disappearances, using the distress calls as bait to lure us into the forest's depths. The rangers exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. I could see the gears turning in their heads, trying to make sense of the situation. The park was in a state of chaos. Rangers were divided on how to handle the situation, some arguing that we had a duty to respond to every call for help, while others urged caution, fearing that we were walking into a trap. The debates grew heated, and tensions were running high. I paused, my gaze drifting to the dancing flames of the campfire. The memories of those days still weighed heavily on my mind, the burden of responsibility never quite leaving my shoulders. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and watch as more and more people vanished into the forest, never to be seen again. But I also knew that rushing in blindly would only lead to more tragedy. I had to be smart about it, to gather as much information as I could before making a move. I looked back at the rangers, their faces etched with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. They were hanging on my every word, desperate to know what happened next. And so, against my better judgment, I made the decision to investigate the situation myself. I knew it was a risk, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to these disappearances than met the eye. Little did I know, I was about to come face to face with a horror beyond my wildest nightmares. The rangers sat in stunned silence, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. I could see the fear in their eyes, the realization that the forest held secrets far more terrifying than they ever could have imagined. But that, my friends, is a story for another time. For now, just remember, never, under any circumstances, answer those calls. No matter how desperate or convincing they may sound, it's a trap, one that will lead you straight into the jaws of the forest's darkest entities. With that, I stood up, my joints creaking with the weight of the years. The rangers watched me go, their faces a mix of awe and terror, and I knew that my story would stay with them for a long time to come. It was a heavy burden to bear, but one that I knew was necessary to keep them safe. As I walked away from the campfire, the flickering light fading behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. But I knew better than to give in to its tricks. I had a job to do, and I would see it through to the end, no matter the cost. As the rangers settled in for another night of storytelling, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease washing over me. The memories of my own encounter with the mysterious distress calls were still fresh in my mind, haunting me like a waking nightmare. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the tale I was about to share. It was a night much like this one, I began, my voice low and steady. I was on a solo patrol, making my rounds through the deepest parts of the forest. The moon was full, casting an eerie glow across the landscape, and the only sound was the crunching of leaves beneath my feet. The rangers leaned in closer, their eyes wide with anticipation. I could see the fear etched on their faces. But I knew that it was important for them to hear this story, to understand the true nature of the danger that lurked within the forest. Suddenly, my radio crackled to life, startling me out of my thoughts. At first, I couldn't make out the words, but as I adjusted the frequency, the voice became clearer. It was a child, a young girl, crying out for help. I paused, the memory of that moment sending a chill down my spine. The girl claimed to be lost and injured, stranded somewhere deep in the heart of the forest. She begged me to come and find her, to save her from the darkness that threatened to swallow her whole. The rangers exchanged nervous glances, the tension in the air palpable. I could see the questions burning in their eyes, but I pressed on, knowing that the most important part of the story was yet to come. Against my better judgment, I decided to respond. I knew the risks, but I couldn't ignore the plea of a child in need. I asked the girl for more information, trying to pinpoint her location, but her answers were vague and evasive. I shook my head, the foolishness of my actions still weighing heavily on my conscience. As I continued to communicate with the girl, I began to notice something strange. She seemed to have an uncanny knowledge of the forest, speaking of landmarks and trails that only a seasoned ranger would know. And then there were the personal details, things about my life that no child could possibly have known. The rangers sat in stunned silence, the weight of my words sinking in. I could see the realization dawning on their faces, the understanding that the voice on the radio was not what it seemed. Suddenly the girl's tone changed. Gone was the frightened, innocent child, replaced by a voice that was cold, mocking, and filled with malice. It taunted me, laughing at my gullibility, reveling in the fact that I had fallen so easily into its trap. I closed my eyes, the memory of that moment still fresh in my mind. I realized then that I had made a terrible mistake. The voice on the radio was not a child at all, but something far more sinister. A malevolent entity that had lured me in with false promises and deceived me with its lies. The rangers sat in stunned silence, the gravity of the situation sinking in. I could see the fear in their eyes, the realization that they too could fall victim to the same trap if they weren't careful. I knew then that I was in trouble. The entity had me right where it wanted me, isolated and alone in the heart of the forest. I could feel its presence all around me, waiting to strike, to claim another victim for its twisted games. I paused, my heart racing at the memory of that moment, but I wasn't going to go down without a fight. I had faced horrors before, and I knew that the only way to survive was to outwit the entity at its own game. And so, with a deep breath and a silent prayer, I prepared to face the nightmare that awaited me. The rangers sat in rapt attention, their faces etched with a mix of fear and anticipation. They knew that the story was far from over, that the true horror was yet to come. And that, my friends, is where the real battle began. A fight for survival against an enemy that knew no mercy, no compassion, and no remorse. But that's a tale for another time, one that I hope you'll never have to face yourselves. As the campfire crackled and popped, casting eerie shadows across the faces of the gathered rangers, I knew it was time to bring my story to a close. The weight of the memories hung heavy on my shoulders, but I knew that sharing them was the only way to keep the others safe. The entity was closing in, its presence like a suffocating darkness that threatened to engulf me, I began, my voice low and steady. I could feel its malevolence, its hunger for my soul, and I knew that I had to act fast if I wanted to survive. The rangers leaned forward, their eyes wide with fear and anticipation. They knew that this was the moment of truth, the point in the story where the hero either triumphed or fell. I ran, my heart pounding in my chest, my lungs burning with every breath. The forest seemed to come alive around me, the trees reaching out with grasping branches, the undergrowth tangling around my feet. But I couldn't stop, couldn't give in to the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. I paused, the memories of that night washing over me like a tidal wave. As I fled deeper into the forest, I stumbled upon a sight that would haunt me for the rest of my days. The remnants of the entity's previous victims, the rangers and visitors who had fallen prey to its deception. Their bodies were twisted and broken, their faces forever frozen in expressions of terror and despair. The rangers sat in stunned silence, the horror of my words sinking in. I could see the tears glistening in their eyes, the realization that they too could have suffered the same fate if they had answered the entity's call. But I couldn't let their sacrifice be in vain. I had to find a way to outsmart the entity, to turn its own tactics against it. And so, with a burst of desperate energy, I changed course, heading back towards the heart of the forest, back towards the source of the entity's power. I could see the confusion on the rangers' faces, the question burning in their eyes. Why would I go back, when every instinct must have been screaming at me to run? I knew that the entity was a creature of deception, that it thrived on the fear and despair of its victims, and so I decided to use that against it. I began to project my own thoughts, my own fears, into the forest around me, creating a web of illusion and misdirection that would confuse and disorient the entity. The rangers sat in rapt attention. For what felt like hours, I played a deadly game of cat and mouse with the entity, always staying one step ahead, always keeping it guessing. And then, just when I thought I couldn't go on any longer, I saw it. A glimmer of light in the distance, a sign that I was nearing the edge of the forest, that safety was within reach. I could feel the tension in the air, the rangers holding their breath as they waited for the final showdown. With a last burst of energy, I broke through the tree line, stumbling into the open air beyond. The entity let out a howl of rage and frustration, but it was too late. I had escaped its grasp, had broken free from its web of lies and deceit. As I finished my story, the rangers sat in silence, the weight of my words sinking in. They knew that they had been given a gift, a glimpse into the true nature of the horrors that lurked within Whispering Pines. And that, my friends, is why we must always be vigilant, why we must never let our guard down. The forest is a place of beauty and wonder, but it is also a place of darkness and danger. It is up to us to keep the balance, to protect the innocent, and to stand against the forces that would seek to destroy us. With that, I stood up, my eyes scanning the faces of the rangers before me. I could see the determination in their eyes, the resolve to carry on the fight, to keep the light burning bright in the face of the darkness. Remember, always trust your instincts, never give in to fear, and most importantly, never, ever answer those calls. For in the end, it is only by standing together that we can hope to triumph over the evil that lurks within the shadows of Whispering Pines.